Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Wonder Mother podcast. I'm your host, Jenna McRory. I'm really excited for this year, 2025. It's going to be a great year. We're going to have a lot of great interviews. And I'm really excited to start off the year with my friend Lauren Senecal. She is a friend, she's an entrepreneur, and a mother of two. When her second child was born, shortly before the COVID pandemic, she realized how different it was going through the postpartum period without a physical support system. She's also suffered some mental health challenges in her youth, and especially after becoming a mom. So she's become really passionate about helping women find support in these often forgotten but all important days of becoming a mom. And also, Lauren's going to talk to us about her breastfeeding journey. It was a really bumpy start to breastfeeding her first daughter, her first child, Nora. And she's been very invested in learning all the ways there is to know about how to feed a baby. And a lot of her postpartum doula work focused on helping families succeed in feeding their babies and passing along the knowledge she's gained through education and experience. So we're really excited to have Lauren here with us today. Lauren, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, we're going to dive right in with learning about how you became a mom and your experience becoming a mother.
Sure. So I became a mom when I was 23. I had my daughter. I got married to my husband. He was my high school sweetheart. We got married quite young, and we always planned to have a family young. So that's what we did. I had my daughter when I was 23 and my son when I was 25.
Aw.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great. I love your kids. She has great kids, if anyone's curious. Nora and Henry are the best.
They are.
So tell me, because I feel like this is like a very real experience for so many women out there. What were your expectations of becoming a mom? And then what was kind of the reality of becoming a mom for you?
My expectations, I didn't really have any. I just always knew that I wanted to be one. But as far as my expectations of like the postpartum period and like that immediate time after having my baby, I really thought that I was just going to have all of this time to myself. I thought I was going to have a baby that you see on TV where they sleep in a crib all day and I'd start a new hobby or, have time to join a gym or like do all of these things. And it was just so far from what ended up being my reality. And I think a lot of other people's realities. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Can you talk to us about like how this postpartum experience like affected your mental health?
Yeah. I mean, my first child, my daughter, she was a very colicky baby who cried a lot, did not ever sleep well ever until probably like a year ago when she turned like 6 years old, I think is when we kind of turned a corner. But it was really, really hard to be that sole person taking care of her all of the time, learning how to breastfeed her, holding her all day long because she absolutely refused to be set down ever. And I also think I developed what would probably be diagnosed as postpartum anxiety. I'm already a very anxious person to begin with, and I had a really hard time having her out of my sight at all when she was a baby, which is not what I expected. I really expected that I was going to be able to, send her off with the grandparents, do the sleepover thing, line up babysitters, and I was completely uncomfortable with having her out of my sight at all for probably the first year to 2 years of her life. She didn't really spend any time overnight with anyone else until my son was born 2 years later. So it was just, it was a lot to take on all by myself, and I kind of made it that way for myself because I didn't trust anybody else with her.
So when you were going through that, I think you sort of mentioned, but you didn't know that you were actually having, like, that was probably an issue, or did you think that was normal, or did you know that that's maybe?
I didn't classify it as anxiety. I had no idea that what I was experiencing was postpartum anxiety, but I did know that I have always been an anxious person through my, like, since I was a child, basically. So I kind of recognized that, like, okay, this isn't what I see other people doing with their babies, but like it felt normal to me to want her to be around me. She wanted to be around me all the time. I wanted her around me all the time. And I think that is normal biologically. I don't think there is anything wrong with wanting to keep your baby close. But when it becomes obsessive and when you refuse to accept help from other people, when you are clearly struggling with your mental
Hmm.
health, that's when I think it becomes a problem.
Yeah. How was that with your husband Eric? Did you trust him to help or no?
I mean, I trusted him, but he never did it right. Right?
Right.
Like, I was the only one who knew how to put her into the baby carrier and bounce her in the proper way so that she would fall asleep. And I was breastfeeding, and we had a really hard time starting breastfeeding. So once we got that established, I had no interest in bringing bottles back into the mix. So
Right.
and she fed, every 2 hours on the dot, basically, for a long, long time. So there wasn't really very much that he could do. But he helped, obviously, any time that he could. And he was the person that I trusted the most out of anyone.
Let's talk more about your breastfeeding journey with Nora and how you made it through that tough time, because it is very difficult to breastfeed. There's this like kind of assumption through movies and, TV shows, you just like put the baby on your boob and it happens. But it's difficult, I think, for many people, but I know you specifically had a really difficult time. So I would love for you to talk about what that experience was and then how you kind of pushed past and made it to having a successful breastfeeding relationship with her baby.
Sure. Yeah, so she was born a few weeks early and she was jaundiced and very sleepy. She had a hard time waking up and really had no interest in waking up to eat at all. She wouldn't open her mouth. She was very, very sleepy, but obviously she needed to get nutrients in. So we ended up bottle feeding her formula because that was the only thing that she had enough energy to really do. And after that, she just really didn't want to latch at all. And breastfeeding was really important to me. It was something that I had discussed with my husband prior to giving birth, that like I wanted to breastfeed at all costs. It was very, very important to me to try my hardest on that. But after her delivery and being so tired at home and I was in pain and had this baby that I wasn't sleeping with, and I was ready to give up completely because she had no interest in latching. We had already started formula feeding with bottles, and I was like, you know what, let's just give up on breastfeeding. This is way too hard for me to think about. And he really pushed me to keep trying. And he's the one who ended up finding the solution that worked for us. He went to the store and purchased a nipple shield for me to use that basically made my breast feel more like a bottle to her. And the very first time I tried to use it, she latched, and I was amazed. And I never used a bottle again after that. And I was so, so ecstatic that that worked. Uh,
Oh, wow.
but yeah, I was ready to give up for sure.
I love that you made it. I love that you figured it out because it is so difficult and it is really hard. It's a mental challenge and a physical challenge and all the things. And you guys figured it out. Did you had he researched the nipple shield? Like, did Eric do this on his own accord?
Not totally. In our area, we have nurses that come to visit you after your baby's born, and the nurse who came had given me a nipple shield. She said maybe this will work for you because she could see that I was very upset about not being able to breastfeed. But the one she gave me wasn't the right size. It was too big for my breast, and so it didn't fit. It didn't work at all. And so after I tried that, Eric was like, I can go to the store and pick up a different size. Like, they're not very expensive. I could just run out there. And I told him, like, don't bother. It's not going to work. We've tried it. Nothing works. And like, I can just really understand why it's so easy to give up if you don't have somebody, because when you're in that like postpartum time where your mental health is not great. I don't know if you know about like the baby blues, where like roughly 2 weeks after you give birth, all your hormones like plummet, or for the 2 weeks after you give birth. And I was just crying nonstop every day. Everything felt like the end of the world and so hard. And it really makes sense why, if you don't have a support system in place that prioritizes your goals as well and can push you towards them, it totally makes sense why there's so many people who have a hard time uh, with breastfeeding.
Yeah. And then, so is this kind of what started your interest in getting involved and helping other women as well, like with this postpartum period?
When my daughter was little, I was really just in survival mode, between like her not sleeping and feeding her all the time and me being just so obsessed with having her with me all the time. I had no ability to think about other people at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But once I had Henry, once I had my second child, and the first few months, I leaned a lot more on my support system. I had a 2-year-old at the time, and I needed that extra help. And then the world shut down when he was about 4 months old. And we were suddenly cut off from our support systems, and we had to stay home alone all day, every day. And that was really, really hard. And that's what got me thinking about all of the families who are in that immediate postpartum time and have to be completely isolated. I'm thinking about how important it is to have support system, and it was just sort of like a wake up call. And so probably when he was about 1.5 years old, when I had exited the baby stage with him, and I had now 2 toddlers, I started to really think about how okay, I really love babies. I love the baby stage. I love being around, and I can see how important it is for families to have extra support, and how there's probably a lot of families out there who don't have grandparents and aunts and uncles and friends around to help them. And when I learned what the profession of a postpartum doula was, it was really interesting to me. So I took that training and started helping families.
Cool. It is really important. Can you tell us a bit about what the duties are of a postpartum doula, more about that role?
For sure. So a postpartum doula is not a medical professional. A doula in general is not a medical professional. They are a support. Postpartum doulas will come to your house generally usually within the first 12 weeks of having a baby. They come, you hire them for a few hours, and they'll help you out around the house. They'll help you care for the baby. They'll help you emotionally if you need to process your birth or talk about all the things that you're going through right now that are obviously taking over your mind, talking about the baby, talking about how if you had any birth trauma or anything like that, and then also providing resources for, that's one of the biggest roles of a postpartum doula, is to hear what problems you're having and know exactly where to point you. If I have or at the time when I was working as a doula, I had a huge list of all the lactation professionals in my area, the sleep professionals, the, body work professionals like massage and chiropractor and all of that kind of stuff that can help with babies who are having issues, which is not even stuff that I knew existed when I had a colic baby. So that's a really big, important thing to have, is just somebody in your corner who knows where you need to go next to get help with the problem that you're having.
Yeah.
My favorite thing to do when I was a doula was definitely come over and let the mom sleep. Aww. And this is going to be totally dependent on the person that they are, because I know when I was postpartum, there is no way I was letting someone take care of my baby in the other room while I went and took a nap. I just would not have been able to fall asleep. But there are a lot of moms that I worked with that loved that time. Come over first thing in the morning, baby's awake, baby's ready for the day, but she hasn't slept at all that night. And she goes and sleeps for 2-3 hours. I put the baby in a carrier and I clean the house and I make her lunch and I just get all of these things ready for her so that when she wakes up, it feels like a fresh start. That was definitely one of my favorite parts.
I mean, that's so incredibly, incredibly important. It just feels so nourishing, even as you're saying it, to have someone come in and do that for you. Yeah, it is. It needs to be, more accessible. I mean, it's true that, I didn't know about this either when I had my first child either. I had no idea. And you're saying, even having chiropractors or people doing body work, or no idea. What do you wish women knew about the breastfeeding and postpartum period? If you were okay, someone's going to have a baby, what do you feel is kind of some of the most important things that they should kind of know?
I think that prenatal education is very important. People will often take a class on birth, right? They'll usually take a birth class so they can learn, what to expect in the hospital or wherever it is that they're planning on giving birth. But also taking some sort of course, especially if you're planning on breastfeeding, taking a course or reading a book or listening to a podcast or doing something to educate yourself about all the different things that can happen with breastfeeding, and just postpartum in general, how to take care of yourself and the baby and all of those things is usually just a very small add-on to a birth course. But I believe that it should be a larger focus of prenatal education if you want to prioritize that healing time because the way that you rest and heal in the first 6 weeks after birth can really impact you for like years down the line. If I'm being honest, you lose a lot of
Wow.
like vital nutrients when you give birth. You need to rest, you need to replenish, and we often just stress like jumping right back into things. And I
Hmm.
think that prioritizing rest, prioritizing nutrients, prioritizing support is very important. And to do all of that before the baby's born is a lot easier than trying to research it, when you have a newborn baby at home and like, oh, I'm freaking out, I don't know what to do. But yeah, if you want to breastfeed, I think there are lots of great books. There are classes you can take. There's online classes. There's probably in-person classes that you can take in your area too. And yeah, I think that would have helped me a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I do remember like, going into the birth of Frankie, my first son. I do remember there is so much focused on the birth. And I think that was also just, I'm not sure if that's like a cultural thing or society or whatever, but I do feel like so much of it is focused on the birth and what kind of birth and birth and birth and birth. And to your point, it's actually after the birth. The birth is like nothing, right? It's like 2 days or something or whatever, or
Hopefully.
depending.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending. But then you're in this postpartum period, which you had said 6 weeks, right? Where it's, really crucial to your mental health, your physical health, what you're doing in that time. So yeah, I agree with you that should just be a bigger part of the curriculum. Like it's a bigger
Definitely
thing.
not discounting birth. Like birth education is very important. There's a lot, especially if you're giving birth in a hospital. It's important to be educated. I am not a fan of the like go with the flow, just because you need to know what they're doing around you and to you,
Hmm.
and you know what you can consent to, what you can say no to. I think birth education is very important. I just also think postpartum education should be seen as equally as important.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, that's very helpful. No, I love this. This is great. I wish someone told me this before I had my kids.
I know.
It's okay. That's why we're doing this podcast. So
Exactly.
hopefully we can help someone. Okay. What are the biggest challenges that mothers face today in terms of mental health, would you say?
I would say just this, well, social media has a really big impact on how we view what motherhood should be, um,
Hmm.
and what we should be able to accomplish in our day to day lives as regular, normal people who generally don't have a whole bunch of hired help.
Hmm.
Um, Being able to go to the gym and have a thriving social life with like so many different friends where you go out to see them every weekend, um, having hobbies, self care tasks that you do every day, and also a great relationship with your kids, a great relationship with your spouse, a perfectly spotless home, um, kids in extracurricular activities. All of these things are seen as being just like normal. Like that's just what is expected of a life of a mother. And it's
Hmm.
not possible at all. Like unless you have, like lots of hired help and lots of support around you, you're not going to get all of those things done every day. And I think that really weighs on you, especially in this age of like TikTok and Instagram. And, that's what we consume a lot of,
Hmm.
is people portraying their lives as being, so perfect. And even if it's not influencers or, people who are paid to make content like that, just regular people, that's all they're really sharing, right? I'm not sharing, what the inside of my linen closet looks like right now on Instagram because it's a huge disaster. I'm sharing, the fun little things that I'm doing with my kids, and I'm sharing, just the nice parts of my life. And that's all we ever see of people because we
Hmm.
are in a time where we are so connected, we are also just very disconnected because we really don't see as many people in person and have these real conversations about like what our lives actually look like, and we just consume it through social media where it's very curated. And I think that that's one of the biggest struggles that parents and people in general face right now.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. I definitely feel like we are more connected, exactly what you said, but we're also more disconnected and we're not really connecting on a deeper level that's kind of necessary to be a human being, and to thrive as a human being. I know you had talked about the life, right? The life that we're seeing like on social media and stuff being like, we're having tons of friends, we have a clean house, we have all like, we're working, we have our kids, we're doing it, and we're so happy. And we're so happy doing all
Of
these
course,
things.
yeah.
Right. We're so happy. Do you feel that there is a way for parents to balance work and relationships and being a parent and hobbies, or do you feel like we need to reframe our vision of what that is?
There's always a possibility for balance. I think having realistic expectations based on your own personal circumstances is so important. Um, Saying no to things and, paring down what you're doing, especially if you are a new parent who is used to the life that you had before you had your baby.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Recognizing that you may not ever get back to what that life looked like before. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not a bad thing. Because if your life looks exactly the way it was before you had your baby, that's a life without your baby, right? And so you
That's
have
true.
a baby now and they're changing your life, and it's not a bad thing, but you have to recognize that like you may not get to do all of the same things that you got to do before. You may lose some of the friends that you had before, and that's okay. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but balance is something that is super important, and recognizing your own mental health. And if you're going to prioritize anything, I would say prioritize your mental well-being. Um, don't put it off for years and years and years. I was recently diagnosed with ADHD, which is something that is missed in a lot of girls when they're young. And being able to start medication for that, and like also researching the effects that ADHD has on a person's life, especially once they become an adult and they have to manage all of these things like a household and children, and how I always feel so much more out of control than I feel like I should be,
Mm-hmm.
has been life changing for me to recognize that that's part of my neurotype. It's part of who I am as a person. And
Mm-hmm.
medication and starting therapy has changed my life completely. And if there's one thing I wish that I had done sooner, it's that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's big. So for mothers who are also, having these feelings, like maybe they have a feeling where they're like, something's just not right, or I'm really struggling, where can they find help? Where is there, are there resources out there that are easy for them to kind of find and plug into?
So one of my favorite resources for postpartum mental health specifically is called Postpartum Support International. It's a website you can go to, and they have um, like hotlines you can call. They have forms that you can print off and fill out. This is one of the things that I would do for the doula families that I worked with, is I would always provide them with their postpartum depression and anxiety checklist.
Okay.
I would give that to them before their baby was born, and I would say, I think that, both of you, if it was a two-parent household, I would say go through this checklist together every day for the first week, and then every week for the first 3 months or something. Like I would make a plan with them so that they were proactively on top of their mental health, and they had a checklist. It wasn't like they just had to look at each other and be like, are you doing okay, are you doing okay? They actually had something they could sit down and do together. They could connect and fill out this form, just to check in on how they're feeling and how they're doing. And if, any red flags popped up, there was resources on that website that they could go to for help. There's
Okay.
another resource that I like to give out called the Perinatal Collective. And it's a couple of therapists who specialize in anxiety for mothers specifically. I do believe they have some therapists that you can talk to there that are specifically trained in like motherhood and postpartum, a lot of postpartum anxiety. And they have a really great Instagram account that gives a lot of good tips. I definitely don't think social media is a bad thing overall. I think that it is a really great way to get education. That was one of my favorite parts of being a doula, was putting out education onto my Instagram that people could get for free and share with other people, and hopefully some of these things that we're talking about here can just be seen a little bit more widely. But yeah, the Perinatal Collective and Postpartum Support International are two of the best sort of like online resources. And then if you're local, I would look up, there's usually like a postpartum hotline that you can call, or crisis lines that you can call. And those are all things that I would have on hand before you ever give birth. Make a list of all of these things, even if you think you're not going to need it, or if a friend of yours is having a baby, and, just have something on hand so you know exactly who to call and where to go. It's going to depend on your region and where you are, but here in Manitoba, we have a crisis hotline that you can call. We have a mobile crisis hotline that they'll come and pick you up and take you to where you need to go. We have a lot of great things here, and possibly we can link some of those because I can't list them off my head right now, but there are definitely resources out there. It's just knowing where to look.
Okay, that's fantastic. Yes, we will we'll link all of these resources that Lauren just gave us, which is so fantastic, in the show notes. So if you're watching on YouTube, it'll be in the description box. And if you're watching on Spotify as well. So that's great. Thank you, Lauren, for those. So now that you're a seasoned mom, right? You've got the 2 kids. How old are your kids now?
They are 5 and 7.
Okay, yes. I would love for you to speak to what are your favorite parts about being a mom. I saw this interview on, I want to say it was BBC, where they were interviewing women from around the world, and the rates, so many women are choosing not to have kids. And I think one of the things I want to sort of get out there with this podcast is like also the joys of it if you want to have one. I also think it's okay if you don't want to have kids. So I just want to hear from you. What are your favorite parts about being a mom?
I totally agree. I understand why people would not want to have kids in the current economy. And I feel like it was always so expected to have kids that maybe a lot of people who didn't want them had them. And then those kids grew up with parents who never really wanted them. So I think it's important to be so sure about your decision. But I personally love being a mom. It's challenging. It's challenging every day in different ways, especially now that they're getting older. But seeing them grow from this little like squishy potato looking thing into like a real human being with a personality, and like my kids, I don't know, you said it. I think my kids are so funny, and like, I don't know, they tell me jokes sometimes, and I'm like, where did you come up with that? And just like watching their personalities and like their interests develop. My son is super into music. My daughter is super into like art and reading and books and stuff like that. And I just think it's like the most special thing that I will ever get to do is watch these kids grow into who they're going to be, and accepting them for whoever they grow up to be and whatever they grow up to be, and just being privileged to be part of their lives. Incredible.
I agree. Just that being a mom is I don't know, it is hard to describe, but it is just so wonderful. And it is like the best thing you can do in your life. Kind of like it's such a special opportunity. We're going to wrap it up with Lauren, and we're going to ask her some fun questions and just learn a little bit more about her and maybe inspire you based on her answers. So Lauren, number 1, what is your go-to coffee order?
This is such a hard thing. It depends on where I am. I'll go for a good double, just like the Canadian that I am. I'm really into like my Nespresso machine at home right now, making like a cappuccino or a latte. If I'm out somewhere at like just like a local coffee shop, a vanilla latte is probably what I would go for.
Oh, okay. I like this. Can you explain what a double is for?
It's 2 creams and 2 sugars.
Okay, yeah. No, I love it. It is a very Canadian thing, so I just think it's really fun that you mentioned it. And okay, so I really love this question because I feel like this can really help other moms. Do you have a favorite quick weekday meal that's like kind of your go-to?
Oh, a frozen lasagna.
Okay, yes.
I would love to say that I make all of my meals from scratch, and I try to cook a lot of things myself, but having a frozen lasagna in the freezer, and they make different versions. They make chicken and vegetable and seafood and all these different kinds of lasagnas. and find one that your family likes and just always have it in the freezer, just for when you need it.
Oh, I'm like, that is a good suggestion. I'm going to do that. See, I'm like, yes, hot tip. Okay. Your favorite ways to spend your weekends.
I like reading. I'm really into reading like fantasy books right now. My husband usually tries to take the kids out to do an activity without me at least once per weekend if I'm lucky, and then I get a few hours at home and I will sit on the couch and drink a coffee and read my book, and that is probably my favorite part of the weekend.
Oh, any like books you've read recently that you want to mention that you feel like are really good?
I, like a lot of millennials last year, got into the Sarah J. Maas universe, which is
Okay.
A Court of Thorns and Roses and Throne of Glass, and they are a cross between romance and fantasy books.
Mhm.
They're very popular right now, and I read them all very quickly. And now I've sort of dove into some of the other books from different authors in that similar genre. They're very fun. Are they like the best novels in the world? Are they written the best? Probably not, but it's
Yeah,
super fun
that's fine.
and entertaining. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, fun. Okay. Any, do you have any mom hacks that you swear by? Like, for instance, my friend Megan says she doesn't tell her kids where they're going anywhere unless they're in the car because there's so many things that can happen, like someone gets sick or whatever. But anyways, is there a mom hack that you can think of that you swear by that
Um,
makes your life easier?
I like to do a load of laundry every night before bed. If you have a washing machine that can delay the start, I have it start at like 5 in the morning, and then
Oh,
wash by the time I wake up. First thing I do is I put it in the dryer, and then it's ready for me to fold throughout the day. So that, I don't know
that
if it's
is
a mom hack,
good.
but it helps me keep up. When I can consistently do that, it makes my life a lot easier.
The best meal you've eaten in the last 2 months, and it's the second week of January, so I don't know, holidays. Did you go anywhere or have any good meals over the holidays?
When on Christmas Day we went to my mom's house, and she ordered, instead of making like a Christmas dinner, she ordered a bunch of food from the Greek market here in Winnipeg, and it's
Ooh.
so good. If you like Greek food, it was incredible. She had to go line up on Christmas Eve. I think she waited like 2 hours in line. Like she'd pre-ordered it, but so had all of these other people, and she had to wait and finally got in, and it was just the most like lemon potatoes, like
Oh,
chicken skewers, amazing tzatziki, olives, like it was so good.
that
Definitely.
sounds so good. What's your go-to way to make your child laugh?
Making their toys talk in funny voices.
Okay.
Like, or making any inanimate object, like picking it up and pretending it's alive and talking with it. They die at that. They think it's
I love that. That's so good. What is the place you want to travel to the most right now?
I'm so not a travel person. I get a lot of
Mhm.
travel anxiety, not surprising, but one thing that I'm like saving up for and planning for and hoping to do in the next few years is like Disney World and all of that. I'm really hoping to get there when my kids are still a good age where it's still kind of magical, but they're also big enough to do some of the bigger rides. Um, yeah, not a super exciting adventurous option, but I don't know. It's all about the kids right now. I don't know what to say.
No, it's true. It's true. It is true. What are you wearing every day this winter? Like, what piece of clothing could you not live without?
Um, I have been wearing my Eras Tour hoodie every single day since I went to the concert in December. I went to the Vancouver concert. I'm such a classic, like millennial girl. I love my, coffees and my Taylor Swift and all of that. But yeah, I've been wearing that with like a specific pair of leggings every day. I come home and my husband's like, "Stop wearing that sweater. We spent a fortune on it."
You're
Yeah,
like, no, I'm wearing it into the ground.
yeah, basically.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice that I've ever received is that what works for you is not going to work for someone else, and what works for someone else is not going to work for you. and that there is not one right way to do things all the time, which is a trap I fell into in early motherhood for sure. I sort of latched on to the way that, I wanted to do things and truly believed that that was the only right way when it comes to, how you feed them, where they sleep, and then as they get older, like how you discipline them and all of those things. There are right and wrongs in some scenarios, but for the most part, it's all very nuanced, and, it just depends on the family, and to have so much grace for other people when they're doing things differently than you, because you just don't know what's working for them and what's not.
Oh, I love that. That's a really good piece of advice.
It took years to learn that and accept it. And there's a really big culture of judgment, with when it comes to parenting and when it comes to, how people are doing things. And even if I can be very convicted that this is how I want to do this for my family, I cannot look at another family and think that they're doing it wrong because they're not following that same path. And that's hard to accept, especially when you're a new parent and you're very defensive about the choices that you're making. Yeah. And every choice that you make feels like it's going to affect them for the rest of their lives, right? So you're like, well, how, if they're making a different choice than me, I'm wrong or they're wrong. And one of us is messing our kid up. And it's just not true. Generally, unless they're doing something super unsafe, they're all going to end up eating fries from the floor of the car. It just is what it is.
Lauren, thank you so much for doing this interview. You had so many nuggets of wisdom in there for us. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and everything you know and have been educated on. Everything it's been a really, really great episode. I'm excited to share it.
Thank you for having me.